grotesquely mutilated corpses, others abandoned in deserted locations, clear signs of torture on the victims' bodies, stories of terrifying deaths within a religious group controlled by a man wearing a white turban. In the quiet streets of Miami, amid neighborhoods teeming with life, the police uncovered these crimes in the 1980s, revealing a man who called himself the Son of God. He was named Yahweh ben Yahweh, and he would raise his voice before hundreds of followers, saying, "I am the prophet of this era, and whoever opposes me opposes God himself." He led a group called the Nation of Yahweh, which believed that black people were the true descendants of Israel, and that white people were the offspring of Satan. But behind the religious rhetoric, a network of violence, intimidation, extortion, and a massive federal trial that lasted for years came to light. This is the full story of the Nation of Yahweh, where religion meets darkness. In 1935, Hulan Mitchell Jr. was born in Oklahoma into an African-American family that was conservative and Christian in nature. His father was a Baptist minister, and the church was an integral part of his daily life. From a young age, Hulan displayed remarkable intelligence, a sharp tongue, and confidence beyond his years. After leaving Oklahoma, Mitchell joined the military and later attended law school. He moved to Atlanta, where, in the 1960s, he joined the Nation of Islam. After leaving the Nation of Islam in the late 1960s, he studied at local theological institutes and quickly rose through the ranks of the Baptist Church. But his sermons were not conventional, and he was not content with the simple role of a preacher behind the pulpit. He was searching for something broader than a sermon, deeper than interpretation. He was searching for meaning and power. In the 1960s and 1970s, America was boiling with racial questions, black liberation movements, and identity revolutions. It was in this climate that Mitchell encountered the ideas of the Black Hebrew Israelites, a group that believed black people were the true descendants of Israel, and that their history had been stolen and rewritten with white pens. He was influenced by these ideas, then embraced them, and ultimately decided to surpass them. By the late 1970s, he began appearing in public under a new name, Yahweh ben Yahweh. He did not present himself merely as a religious reformer, but as the Son of God himself, his messenger in this era, sent to deliver black Israelites from ignorance and spiritual slavery. In 1979, he founded his own congregation in Miami, Florida, and named it Nation of Yahweh. From the very first moment, the goal was not simply to worship God, but to build a nation, an identity, and an alternative authority, where the leader was the prophet was the Son, and the Son was not to be questioned. The Nation of Yahweh was not merely a new religious group, it was a complete project to redefine identity, religion, and belonging from scratch. From its inception, the group's doctrine was built on three unshakable pillars. God's name is Yahweh, the prophet is Yahweh ben Yahweh, and the chosen people are black people only. The sect rejected all Western labels, Lord, God, Jesus, Christianity, and regarded them as tools of spiritual and cultural colonization imposed on Africans over centuries of slavery. Followers believed that African Americans were not merely victims, but the true heirs of the Old Testament. They were the original Israelites, erased by history, whose identity had been stolen, and whose names had been removed from religious and historical texts. But the leader did not stop at this idea. He openly declared himself the Son of Yahweh sent to them. He repeatedly stated, "He who does not acknowledge me does not know God. He who follows me enters grace." He demanded absolute faith, complete obedience, and a mental severance from all previously held knowledge. The leader was not just a religious figure, he became the spiritual center of the group's universe. Within the Nation of Yahweh, members wore white turbans and replaced their slave names with new Hebrew names. They abandoned their former identities and began a new life governed by a strict, hierarchical system that tolerated no rebellion or questioning. In its outward teachings, the doctrine preached, purity, discipline, respect for family, and a return to Hebrew roots. But behind this rhetoric, harsher ideas prevailed. White people were the descendants of Satan. White Jews had falsely stolen the name of Israel. The battle for salvation required purging the earth of corruption and of God's enemies. In internal lessons, followers were taught to memorize, repeat, and believe, not to think. They were constantly reminded, loyalty is the path to paradise, hesitation is the gateway to damnation. In this closed environment, where criticism and dissent were forbidden, faith became a tool of control, and the leader, little by little, became a shadow of God on earth. Since its founding in 1979, the Nation of Yahweh did not delay in spreading. Within just a few years, it grew from a small sect in the alleys of Miami into a massive religious and economic movement, owning real estate, running businesses, and controlling thousands of followers across multiple states. The secret lay in the leader's plan. He did not just want to teach people the doctrine, he wanted to build a state within a state, a fully integrated system that would free the chosen people of God from reliance on the outside world and grant them a sense of empowerment, identity, and collective sanctity. In the early 1980s, the group began buying abandoned buildings in Miami's poor neighborhoods. They converted them into housing for new recruits, then into food distribution centers, and later opened stores, warehouses, outreach centers, boarding schools, and even small media institutions. Funding relied on mandatory donations from followers, who were required to contribute a portion of their salaries every month. Work within the group was carried out in the spirit of a holy jihad. Men built, women organized, children learned, and everything was done in the name of the group and for the benefit of the leader. At the heart of this system, weekly speeches were broadcast from a massive hall they called the Temple, where Yahweh ben Yahweh, in his white turban, addressed hundreds of followers in an energetic, direct, and repetitive style, emphasizing, "You are the chosen people of God. You are the true heirs of the earth. The world will not recognize you unless you declare that I am his prophet in this era." In less than 5 years, the group's influence spread to over 20 U.S. states, and its followers numbered in the thousands. In some cities, the group's field influence became tangible. It was no longer just a sect, but a tightly knit religious, economic, and social network. Yet with this rapid rise came an inevitable question. Was this merely a religious success? Or was it the beginning of a closed doctrinal organization that saw the outside world only as a threat? From the outside, the Nation of Yahweh appeared to be an organized religious group, relying on discipline, identity, and teamwork. But inside, it was something entirely different. At the heart of the system was a strict hierarchy, leaving no room for hesitation or rebellion. At the top stood Yahweh ben Yahweh, the absolute leader and the sent son. Beneath his authority were graded layers of officials called the princes of Yahweh, then the preachers, followed by the soldiers, who were the general followers. Daily life within the group was scheduled to the minute. Everything was planned, executed under instruction, and reviewed through reports. Food, clothing, sleeping arrangements, even the words one was allowed to speak. No room for chance, no privacy. The uniform, the white turban, Hebrew names, religious slogans, all served a single purpose: to dissolve the individual into the group. In sermons and internal instructions, it was constantly repeated: "You are no longer yourself. You are a servant of Yahweh, a soldier in the nation of Yahweh, and your loyalty to the leader is proof of your true faith." Family relationships changed. Husbands and wives were required to offer obedience to the leader first, before anyone else. Children were raised to believe that the sect came above the family. Those who missed attendance or showed hesitation were called in for accountability. An internal system of punishments existed: isolation, deprivation, public shaming, verbal reprimands, and sometimes followers were asked to prove their loyalty through missions. No one dared to ask questions about money, doctrine, or leadership. Every question was considered a challenge to Yahweh himself. Separation from the outside world was not just physical, but psychological. Newspapers were rejected, television forbidden, outside education viewed with suspicion. Members were instructed to cut ties with non-members and to purify themselves from the thoughts of the outside society, which was labeled the satanic world. One defector later said, "They created a complete bubble. No light enters it except the leader's light. You don't see the world as it is. You see it as they want you to see it." In this closed environment, loyalty to the leader gradually transformed from obedience into worship. By the late 1980s, the Nation of Yahweh was no longer just a religious name whispered in the streets of Miami. It had become a phenomenon, one that inspired fear more than curiosity. Newspapers began asking questions. Police reports multiplied. Scattered testimonies started emerging from defectors, relatives of members, and local residents. Something dark was happening inside. Between 1986 and 1989, a series of mysterious crimes was recorded. Victims were killed in horrifying ways, including defectors from the group, businessmen who refused to cooperate, and others described as enemies of God. Many of these cases remained unsolved, but the pattern was the same. Authorities began connecting the dots, and the most dangerous question arose: was there an organized network of violence within the group? And did the leader himself know, or even give the orders? Investigations revealed the existence of a semi-secret unit within the sect, referred to by some members as the Mujahideen, or Warriors for Yahweh. It was a closed unit, secretly recruited from the most loyal followers. Its mission: to carry out punishment orders, silently and without a trace. Leaked testimonies later spoke of rites of obedience, in which new members were required to prove their loyalty through field missions. Some were relatively simple, collecting donations by force, threatening defectors, but others escalated to murder. In 1990, the FBI officially announced the leader of the group, Yahweh ben Yahweh, was a suspect in conspiracy to commit murder, within the framework of a religious organization using violence to maintain its authority. The charges were not simple. The group was not a small sect, but a complex, closed, and cohesive organization. Evidence was not direct, but testimonies began to accumulate. From inside the group, some former members started to speak. One said, "If you are loyal, they ask you to prove it, and if you hesitate, you are the next traitor." As investigations expanded, another truth emerged. The leader was not only aware, he was the one giving the orders. In November 1990, Yahweh ben Yahweh was officially arrested after more than 2 years of federal investigations. The charges were severe, complex, and unprecedented in the context of prosecuting the leader of a religious sect: conspiracy to commit 14 murders, extortion through a closed religious network, incitement to violence, manipulating followers through a nationalist religious ideology. The United States was watching closely. The media described the case as the most dangerous confrontation between the state and a religious sect since Jonestown. The trial began in 1992 in a federal courtroom in Miami. Before a panel of jurors, the prosecution presented intricate evidence, testimonies from defectors, audio recordings, financial documents, and forensic expert reports. Witnesses described the group's atmosphere as that of a closed religious state, where followers were required to obey blindly, and loyalty was rewarded with status, or enforced through violent orders. One defector testified in court, "He told me, if you want to be pure, cleanse the earth of the infidels." The defense relied on a dual strategy. 1. Denying that the leader had direct knowledge of any acts of violence. 2. Claiming that witnesses had been coached or manipulated by the government. Throughout the trial, Yahweh ben Yahweh showed no remorse or hesitation. He sat in white, calm and confident, simply stating, "I love my people, I defend my God, and I will not back down." By the end of the trial, the court could not establish a direct link between the leader and all the crimes. However, he was convicted on a primary charge: conspiracy within an organization involved in violence. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, serving 11 before being released in 2001 on supervised bail for health reasons. He died a few years later, in 2007, from prostate cancer at the age of 71. But his death did not end the questions. They are still asked today. Was the nation of Yahweh a genuine project of spiritual liberation, or a closed organization driven by the leader's prophecy to the edge of bloodshed? After the death of Yahweh ben Yahweh in 2007, the nation of Yahweh underwent profound transformations, with a significant decline in its influence and power. The leader had been the heart and soul of the group, and with his passing, the organizational structures he built fell apart, and the cohesion of the followers weakened. The group split into small, scattered branches, each attempting to reinterpret the doctrine in its own way, or simply continuing limited activities within local communities. The nation of Yahweh was no longer the religious and social force it had been in the 1980s and 1990s. Yet, the group's ideology and slogans remained present, particularly within some extremist factions of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. Some continue to embrace beliefs combining religious racism and African nationalism, viewing Yahweh ben Yahweh as a symbol of resistance against historical injustice. American society, especially in Miami, still recalls that era with concern, as the sect affected many lives and caused social divisions and internal conflicts. The issues of violence and abuses committed by the group have also remained subjects of ongoing investigations and documentary journalism, highlighting the dangers of combining religion with absolute power. Today, the nation of Yahweh is considered a cautionary example of how an emerging religious movement, despite its apparent intentions or goals, can transform into a closed organization that poses a threat to both its members and society. Its history reflects the ongoing struggle between religion and power, and between identity and loyalty, prompting us to ask, how can societies protect their members from falling prey to religious leaders who exploit faith for personal gain? And how can we distinguish between genuine religion and recruitment movements that conceal suspicious agendas behind the guise of spirituality?